What sport do you not really think is a sport? I think it's considered a sport in the same sense as chess is considered a sport. Certain kinds of poker, for example Texas Hold'em, which have the player versus the whole table, require strategy and mental skill to be good and win at. You need to be able to pick up on opponents' tells while being aware of and hiding your own, and you need to understand what makes a good hand and when to fold or when to raise. Know when to hold M, know when to fold M, know when to walk away, know when to run. Personally, I wouldn't consider either poker or chess to be a sport so much as a contest of minds, but I can understand why they're considered as such. Skateboarding isn't a sport because it isn't a game. This is not a judgment on skateboarding. It requires plenty of athleticism and skill. It's the equal to figure skating. A sport, however, requires an aspect of game. To continue the example of figure skating, hockey is an event that requires similar skills, but it is a sport where figure skating is not due to the fact that hockey is a game. A better example is karate. Olympic karate has two types: kata and kumite. Kumite is a sport but kata is not. A kata event is singular person being judged by their adherence to form and their energy. It is judged athleticism. Kumite is a match between two competitors. It is a game and therefore is a sport. Karate has sport and non-sport aspects. I could understand considering cornhole a sport. Further up the thread, I defined a sport as a game that uses players' physical skill more than their mental skill, which is what separates sports from games like poker and chess. Cornhole is definitely more reliant on physical skill over mental. Same with darts. Just because they aren't highly physically demanding doesn't mean physicality isn't the most important aspect anyway. Spelling bee though, that's barely even a game, let alone a sport. Every time I am like, oh, this is not really all that hard, these people are not athletes, I pretty much eat my words. Oh, climbing competitions, sure, climbing is hard, but what is competitive about it? Turns out everything that sport is fucking insane, and those people are some of the most in shape badass athletes out there. Disc golf was another one. Those people are so fucking good, they have different discs for different shots, they have to plan out every throw. And like thread their disc through trees from 400 feet away. They are fucking insane. If people are watching it on TV, it's probably a sport and people are probably pretty badass at it. There is a cliff diving circuit that is pretty badass too. There are a lot of cool spots and a lot of them are posted on YouTube. Death diving is fun. I have no idea how it works. The score is based on style and originality maybe. I don't know, but it's fucking wild and fun to watch. Say what you say about speed walking, but the amount of absolutely balls to the walls training the top guys have to do to train their bodies to be able to push their physical and mental limits is something otherworldly. The marathon has nothing when compared to the 50-kilometer speed walk. I have an old friend from high school who's an Olympic level speed walker, so I have some second-hand experience and knowledge of the sport. The stuff he does is insane. Also, if you look at speed walking in slow motion, they are all breaking the rules the entire time, by actually running instead of walking. They can only be disqualified though by getting pulled by the observers, I think, 3 times for running. So not only is it arguably not a sport, but none of the practitioners actually compete by the rules. Mental. Edit, Googled and I am wrong. Her reply below: infractions must be visible to naked eye, unaided. Therefore the slow motion running I am talking about does seem to be accepted, within the rules. An activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. Yeah, good luck defining what a sport is based on that broad definition. You could argue chess isn't a sport because there's no physical exertion, but you try exercising your brain for many hours against some of the smartest people in the world, you'll be exhausted. To me, if it's a competition that others are willing to spectate on and enjoy, it can legitimately be called a sport. And to further confuse the argument, breaking, more commonly known as breakdancing, will be in the 2024 Olympics. Instead of having separate performances like most dance competitions, breaking features head-to-head battles which are often decided by strategy, teamwork, and overall athleticism, but are ultimately decided by a panel of judges. There's been an ongoing debate in the breaking community about whether it's an art or a sport, and it will be interesting to see what happens to the public perception in 2024. Hunting. How can it be a sport if the other team doesn't know it's playing? By that logic, I've beaten all you fuckers in the morning foot races that only I show up to, and that none of you know about. I've been kicking your asses for 17 weeks. Step it up. Edit. To everyone saying that all animals are always hunting. Not against guns. They're not. Unless you're growing mano a mano with Shere Khan and King Louie, you can shut the hell up about hunt or be hunted. Edit 2. I'm gonna bring a flamethrower to my next softball game. Those dumbasses won't stand a chance. /S. As someone who grew up hunting, to me I've never viewed it as a sport, but as a lifestyle. And that's probably BC. We have always hunted to eat and not to just stuff and mount. I really hate that people hunt just to hunt as well as fish just to fish. I believe if you're taking the life of an animal, it should be 1, because it's endangering your life, or 2, to sustain your family, community. Hunting for sport is gross to me. Agreed, but don't tell people in the UK that it isn't a sport. They really take it seriously over there. I've tried though to find something to like with darts, but I can't get it past as seeing it as a good time waster game. Have you tried sitting down to watch a full darts match? I have, multiple times, and it's just so monotonous to watch. The commentators try so hard filling in the blanks as to what to talk about when it comes to darts. From all the debate, the Council of Europe Charter on Sport uses the following definition: sport means all forms of physical activity, which through casual or organized participation, aim at expressing or improving physical fitness and mental well-being, forming social relationships or obtaining results in competition at all levels. https://www.bbc.co.uk/teach/ what constitutes a sport /z4vfmfr. To me that means things like chess, gaming, darts, are certainly not a sport. Agreed. It also missed the reality that 80% plus of what makes individuals good at even the most highly physical and athletic sports are characteristics, skills that aren't physical in nature. So much is mental repetition that wires our brains. So much is creativity, situational awareness, anticipation and game theory, etc. It's natural for observers to reduce sports, games and their players down to how we differ from them. And we're biased toward attributing most of the difference to the overt differences, which are physical in nature, size, speed, strength, etc., but that's not accurate. There's a reason the comments and quotes from the greatest performers of all time always center around behavior and mentality. That's what they know sets themselves apart, and they're trying to share that wisdom since it's always overlooked. Yep, or some textbook definition battle rather than what's actually useful definition in 2021. I don't really mind too much if someone feels that chess or sports etc. aren't sports for them personally. I would consider anything with organized competition, competitive activity that people watch that uses similar structures to traditional sports as a sport. Even if I wouldn't care too much what people personally think in public, I would defend all of these less physically strenuous sports as sports, since I've worked in some of them in the past and have many friends who work at those sports, so I want to see them succeed. As long as whether they are publicly considered sport or not affects getting visas, legal stuff for tournaments and pro leagues and players, athletes' personal legal stuff regarding income, I hope that anyone who doesn't actively have something against those kind of activities would at least refrain from making a huge point about how they are not a sport publicly. So this is an interesting question, as it revolves around what people's definition of sport actually is. For me, it's where 2 or more people are actively competitively engaging in something to win, and so therefore it doesn't necessarily have to be athletic to be a sport. That said, for me, people who actually play Quidditch in real life are a joke. Update: sport, v.c. 1400, to take pleasure, to amuse oneself, from Old French disporter, deporter to divert, amuse, please, play, to seek amusement, literally carry away, the mind from serious matters, from day away. See this, plus porter to carry, from Latin porta to carry. Turns out that etymology seems to be the best sport of all. Chess. When I was a geometry teacher, I used to take my students through an interesting discussion where I listed 20 activities: bowling, baseball, gymnastics, car racing, darts, Call of Duty, chess, etc., and asked them to identify which ones were sports. Then, as I asked students why they felt a particular activity qualifies as a sport, students often found their justification resulted in a contradiction with their other answers. They then were asked to write their own definition of sport that would align with every single one of their opinions. It was very challenging, and some found that they just had to change their opinion. Try writing a definition of sport where archery qualifies but darts does not. Geometry involves careful wording of definitions, postulates and theorems, and this was an interesting way of introducing them to that idea. My own definition: an activity involving multiple people and requiring physical endurance, hand-eye coordination, speed, and/or strength, in which there is a method of determining the winners. Activities that involve endurance or strength are considered athletic sports. Activities that do not require any of the 4 physical skills are considered games. It's a lot harder than it looks. The skill necessary to do a shot at precisely the correct angle and with the right weight, push, is difficult. Many curling clubs will be holding open houses for people to try it as the season begins this fall. If you're anywhere near a scene, I encourage you to try our club. We have the friendliest bunch of people, and competition at a variety of levels. List of clubs in the United States. I did a lot of informal rail riding on horses growing up and then decided to take proper lessons this spring, thinking how hard can it be? I was surprised how much muscle, balance and coordination it takes to appropriately cue horses beyond the basics, especially when any amount of speed is involved. However, whether it counts as a sport kind of depends on whether you would consider NASCAR or Formula One a sport. It takes technique to drive, but it's also very dependent on the vehicle. Maybe more of a competition? I used to work on a ranch and we took tourists out on trail rides. We are talking about older horses in their mid to late teens and early 20s, doing nothing but walking on a beach or easy forest trails for an hour, nose to tail the whole time. Yet, the second we got back to the yard and got people dismounted, it was 5-10 minutes of constant bellyaching about how much they hurt. I'm going to walk funny for a week. I can barely stand, my back is killing me. Oh God, I think I'm dying. Does it feel like the horse did all the work? And if that's how you feel when after less than an hour, on a slow relaxing rail ride, how do you think you're going to feel when you actually have to do something with a horse that isn't retirement age, with a horse that has no idea what is coming next, and is completely dependent on your actions, your physicality, and your strategy? A horse is a sentient piece of sports equipment. Bikes don't bolt if they're unsure about a rider's plan. If you're running at a jump, a pole vaulter's pole isn't going to try and dodge on its own at the last second. A bobsled goes where physics tells it to go. It's the people in the sled manipulating it with their actions that determine a winner. Equestrian sports require endurance, strength, speed, balance and precision by both team members. It requires strategy, resiliency, and comprehension of the point where skills meet art. Anyone who has ever ridden a horse for more than a trail ride can tell you this. If you don't think it is, swing by my farm. I've got a equine equivalent of Ferrari out back who would love to demonstrate why you're wrong. A sport is something that involves physical exertion and skill while competing, and that is definitely most equestrian sports. After riding for a while, not just being sat on a horse at a plod, doing nothing, you will be out of breath and your leg and core muscles will feel it the next day. Obviously, it is a fair bit of work the horse, but this doesn't negate the work it is for the human, and also many sports also require something extra other than the human competing, tennis racket and ball, water for swimming, etc. It's just different in that the horse is a living animal you have to make a bond with. It's a combined effort. First of all, it depends what discipline you are talking. I've ridden both English and Western and find English to be more challenging. As for individual events, the point of dressage is to do fancy moves without looking like it takes effort. I've been training for nearly 10 years and I still have a lot to learn. It's extremely challenging but very rewarding. If you are doing a pony ride, no, there is no skill, but riding at a higher level is very difficult. Equestrians train at the gym and with their horses nearly every day. Once you try to do something besides go in a straight line, you soon realize that communicating to an animal with a mind of its own is much more difficult than you thought. Curler here, depending on ice condition, you can really slay some calories sweeping, and the skill needed to do your shot precisely as the skip called it is difficult, very narrow angle and the amount of weight, push, you apply to the stone. Not to mention the skip has to read the ice to figure out how much the stone will curl, and decide when to have the sweepers sweep to alter the trajectory and distance of the stone. Not as easy as it looks. Besides, we don't all wear those electric curling pants like the Norwegian Olympic team. We take it pretty seriously. There are elitists in gold for certain, but most like my friends and I are just looking to spend time outside hanging out away from wives/so's and having some drinks. No douchebaggery at all. It also isn't cheap, but it isn't the most expensive sport I have ever played either. Get a set of beginner clubs and you are set for several years. At a professional level it is definitely a sport, but definitely not a waste. Most cases that land would be used for some other industrial bullshit if it wasn't. I know I won't change your mind, but wanted to offer a perspective. As someone who is an equestrian, it most definitely is a sport. I do other sports as well, but dressage is by far the hardest. It doesn't look like anything, and that's the entire point. The people in the Olympics spend decades training and building up muscle in order to sit perfect still and give such subtle clues to their horse that the people watching can hardly see. Although I prefer jumping, dressage is incredibly challenging and is what made me start to become a better rider. Anyone can sit on a horse and yaw it. Kicking a horse and flapping your arms around is easy, but you will quickly lose control and cannot do fancy moves. Being able to tell your horse to do things like pirouettes without a non-equestrian noticing is what's hard. The horse is just as much an athlete as well. It's a team sport. Horses aren't just forced to do something they hate. They are bred for generations to get the right background, and if they aren't meant for it, they end up going into a different discipline. I'm about to be downvoted into oblivion, but any sport where the scoring is subjective, if there's judges involved, it's not a sport. I'm not saying it doesn't take a tremendous amount of discipline, coordination and physicality to compete in figure skating, or synchronized swimming, gymnastics or skateboarding. It may sound like a contradiction, but I consider people who participate in these activities to be true athletes. But so does ballroom dancing or cheerleading, or a circus trapeze act. The only reason we consider some activities sports and others not is because of their inclusion in the Olympics. If scoring is subjective, then the personal bias of each judge becomes part of the scoring, or worse, judges have been known to cheat or accept bribes. So how can you truly say who is the best at any sport where subjectivity is involved? Until you develop a computerized judge and remove the fallibility of human judges, you can't say it's a sport in the truest sense. Golf is not a sport. To be considered a sport, an activity should require at least 4 out of 5 of these: strength, speed, skill, stamina and strategy. Golf requires a great deal of skill, but does not require speed or stamina, and only in the broadest sense does it require strength to drive the ball, and strategy to put it in the hole in the fewest strokes, but overall it falls short. The fact that you can have a chain-smoking, physically unfit people like John Daly in pro events tells you everything you need to know. Golf, it is a pastime, not a sport. That doesn't mean there isn't an incredibly high level of skill involved with it, and loads of practice required. However, there is hardly any physical activity involved, and pretty much it becomes a competition of who can perform approximately, one particular motion better than others, just because it requires more strength from a very specific subset of muscles, doesn't fundamentally change it from darts or billiards or archery or even skee ball at the arcade. Perform approximately the same motion as few times as possible, trying to hit the target as soon as possible.